Number 1. The Dragon Hole. 15 miles off the Paracel Islands in the South China Sea, the ocean floor opens into a vertical shaft of collapsed limestone. It drops 987 feet straight down. That makes it the deepest known blue hole on Earth. For comparison, Dean's Blue Hole in the Bahamas reaches 663 feet. The Great Blue Hole off Belize goes to 407. The Dragon Hole dwarfs both of them. The formation is ancient. During the Pleistocene era, roughly 2.5 million to 11,000 years ago, sea levels were dramatically lower. Limestone karst terrain sat exposed to the open air, and over millennia, chemical weathering hollowed it out. When seas rose again, the caverns flooded. Some collapsed inward. The Dragon Hole is the result, a vertical underwater cave punched through bedrock. Now here is where it gets strange. Survey teams measuring the water chemistry inside the hole found 0 dissolved oxygen below a certain depth. The water is also highly acidic. In any standard biological model, those two conditions together should sterilize all complex life. Nothing with a multi-organ system should survive. But in 2016, a Chinese government expedition documented shellfish, crustaceans, and complex multicellular organisms living inside the hole. Some of them were soft-bodied creatures that had never been cataloged. No taxonomy, no published descriptions. They exist in photographs taken during the dive. That is all. And the expedition data? Classified. The full findings were submitted to Chinese authorities and have never been released to the international scientific community. Oceanographic institutions from around the world filed formal requests to review biological samples or conduct independent surveys. Every request was denied. There is also the matter of sound. At depths exceeding 600 feet, the expedition's instruments picked up structured, rhythmic acoustic signatures. Not random noise. Patterned audio. Analysts compared the recordings against whale song frequency profiles, tectonic microseismic signatures, and equipment interference baselines. Nothing matched. The sounds did not correspond to any known source. Then in 2018, satellite imaging detected unusual water displacement patterns at the hole's opening. The patterns were consistent with a large object or hydrodynamic force either entering or exiting the shaft. Independent researchers began publishing analyses of the satellite data. Shortly after, the images were quietly pulled from public databases. Local fishermen and naval operators in the area report compasses spinning erratically near the site. Sonar systems fail. Engines cut out without diagnostic cause. And in 2020, a geological proposal to drill into the lower chambers of the Dragon Hole was rejected. No justification was given. So what is the mainstream explanation? Chemosynthetic ecosystems. Life powered by chemical reactions rather than sunlight or oxygen, similar to what we find near hydrothermal vents. The acoustic signatures could be unusual reverberation patterns within the limestone chamber walls. That is plausible. It is also incomplete. The historical angle draws on local Chinese legend. The Dragon Hole corresponds to stories about Longdong, the eye of the South China Sea, referenced in texts for centuries as a gateway to what depends on which text you read. The speculative interpretation focuses on behavior rather than geology. The classification, the data erasure, the denied access. If the sounds are just echoes and the organisms are just unusual microbes, why has no outside researcher been allowed to verify that? Some argue the Chinese authorities found something inside that shaft they simply cannot explain publicly. Whether that is a new form of life, a non-geological sound source, or something else entirely remains an open question. What we know for certain, complex organisms are living in conditions that should kill them. And something at 600 feet is making sounds that match nothing in any database on Earth. And no one outside a single government is allowed to look. Number 2. The Ningen. In the early 2000s, crew members aboard Japanese government research vessels and whaling ships operating in Antarctic waters south of 60 degrees latitude began filing reports about something in the water. They described massive, pale, humanoid-shaped creatures. Estimated length 20 to 30 meters. That is roughly the size of an adult blue whale. The witnesses described featureless white skin, elongated torsos, flipper-like appendages where arms would be, and dark markings where eyes should sit. No mouth. No recognizable face. These were not tourists on a cruise ship. The observers were experienced maritime crew. They knew whale behavior. They knew ice formations. They knew what every species of known Antarctic megafauna looks like from the surface of a rolling vessel. They insisted these were not whales. Multiple witnesses described the creatures moving with apparent purpose and direction, not drifting, not tumbling in a current, swimming deliberately. Now, before this sounds entirely fantastical, consider the science that makes it at least physically possible. Deep-sea gigantism is a well-documented phenomenon. Species living in deep, cold ocean environments routinely grow far larger than their shallow water relatives. Cold temperatures slow metabolism. High pressure alters cellular processes. Low predation removes the usual constraints on body size. The colossal squid, Misonicotuthis hamiltoni, has been confirmed at lengths up to 14 meters. Giant isopods reach 50 centimeters. Japanese spider crabs span nearly 4 meters across. The deep ocean produces big things. That is not speculation. It is documented biology. The question is simply where the upper limit sits. And the honest answer is, we do not know. In 2007, a Japanese expedition deployed sonar in Antarctic waters and detected large, fast-moving biological entities operating below 1,000 meters depth. The targets moved in deliberate, synchronized patterns, not the loose clustering of schooling fish, not the staggered travel of a whale pod. Coordinated formation movement. The acoustic signatures did not match any cataloged marine species. The sonar data was reviewed by Japanese government officials. It was promptly classified and removed from the expedition's public report. Crew members who had filed sighting reports were reassigned. Their accounts never entered official maritime records. 5 years later, in 2012, a submersible operating near the Antarctic ocean floor filmed a pale, elongated organism gliding along the bottom. It was too large for any known species. The morphology was wrong for any documented megafauna. After preliminary analysis suggested a potential new species discovery, the footage was recalled by expedition leadership. It was reportedly deleted. Commercial fishermen in Antarctic waters report something else: large, powerful tears in deep-sea nets. The damage patterns do not match any known species' bite radius or tensile behavior, and multiple reports describe the creatures surfacing briefly near ships as if observing, then submerging rapidly. The mainstream position is straightforward. Misidentified ice formations, albino whales, giant squid seen through poor Antarctic visibility. All reasonable. The historical angle points to Japanese maritime folklore and the umabozu, massive sea humanoids described in sailing accounts for centuries. A cultural echo, perhaps, or a pattern of encounters with a consistent source. The speculative view focuses on what happened to the data. Sonar records classified, footage deleted, witnesses reassigned. If these were just ice chunks and confused whales, the response was extraordinary. Something large lives in Antarctic deep water. Multiple technologies have detected it, and every dataset that might identify it has been removed from public access. Number 3, Heracleion. In the year 2000, French marine archaeologist Frank Godiot was conducting a survey in Abu Qir Bay off the coast of Alexandria, Egypt. Beneath 30 feet of water, he found an entire city. Heracleion, known as Thonis to the Egyptians, was Egypt's primary Mediterranean gateway port. The historian Herodotus wrote about it in the 5th century BCE. For generations, scholars assumed the city was mythological, a literary invention. It was real, and it was enormous. The submerged site spans several square miles of seafloor, making it one of the largest underwater archaeological discoveries ever recorded. The artifact density is staggering. Thousands of objects have been recovered: gold coins, bronze statues standing over 16 feet tall, 69 ancient ships, stone sarcophagi. Among the most significant finds is the Decree of Sés, an intact stone slab confirming that Heracleion served as Egypt's mandatory port of entry for all Mediterranean trade. Every foreign ship passed through here. This was the customs gateway of an empire. The city vanished around the 2nd century BCE. That fact alone is not unusual. Cities fall. But Heracleion did not decline. There are no records of gradual abandonment, no accounts of population relocation, no refugee stories in Alexandria, or any neighboring settlement. One of the wealthiest port cities on the Mediterranean simply stopped existing, and nobody wrote down where the people went. The structural evidence tells a specific story. Buildings did not erode laterally over decades, the way a slowly sinking city would. They dropped straight down. Vertical collapse. Artifacts lie scattered across the seabed as if abandoned in a single moment. Trade logs end mid-sentence. Some temple interiors still contain statues upright on their bases, surrounded by collapsed walls. The floor fell while the structures briefly held their shape. High-value gold, jewelry, and religious objects were never removed. Nobody packed. Nobody evacuated. The mainstream geological explanation is soil liquefaction triggered by an earthquake, combined with rising sea levels and the inherent instability of the Nile Delta's clay foundation. That is plausible. Liquefaction can cause rapid ground failure. But if the cause was a natural earthquake survivable by at least some portion of the population, then where are the survivors' accounts? Alexandria was a short distance away. No written record from any neighboring city mentions absorbing refugees from a major port collapse. After 2010, access to the site became sharply restricted. The Egyptian government limited dive permits. Specific zones were declared off-limits. Proposals to use advanced sonar to create a complete map of the city were rejected. Most significantly, archaeological teams were blocked from excavating older, deeper layers beneath the known city structures. That effectively halted all stratigraphic research, the very kind of work that would reveal what existed before Heracleion. The archaeological theory asks a pointed question: what is in those deeper layers? If the answer is simply more delta mud, there is no reason to block the dig. If the answer is structures or artifacts that predate the established timeline of Egyptian civilization, the restriction makes a different kind of sense. The speculative view goes further: the perfectly vertical collapse, the instant abandonment, the aggressive containment of the site. Some researchers have argued the event that sank Heracleion was more sudden and more energetic than any documented natural earthquake in the region. What lies beneath the oldest layer of one of Egypt's greatest cities? That remains, by government mandate, an unanswered question. Number 4. The Chalanchi Deep. The Mariana Trench sits in the western Pacific Ocean. At its lowest point, the Challenger Deep, the floor drops to approximately 36,000 feet below the surface. The pressure at that depth exceeds 16,000 pounds per square inch. It is the deepest known point on Earth. In 1960, Swiss engineer Jacques Piccard and U.S. Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh descended to the bottom aboard the bathyscaphe Trieste. What Walsh reported seeing on the trench floor was a flatfish, resembling a sole, swimming across the sediment. The response from the scientific establishment was immediate and dismissive. At 16,000 psi, no vertebrate with a swim bladder or complex skeletal system should be able to survive. Walsh's sighting was reclassified as a probable misidentification, a jellyfish or a sea cucumber seen under poor lighting conditions. Walsh himself never retracted his account. He maintained until his death in 2023 that he saw a fish. After the Trieste mission, no crewed return to the Challenger Deep was funded or authorized for 50 years. Not because the technology was unavailable. The gap is typically attributed to bureaucratic disinterest. That is a long time to be disinterested in the deepest place on Earth. In 2012, filmmaker James Cameron made a solo descent in the deep-sea Challenger. He described the bottom as a barren, muddy landscape. No complex life. His footage was used to officially close the book on Walsh's 1960 sighting. The flatfish was an error. Case closed. Except it was not closed. Between 2019 and 2020, China conducted its Fenduze mission to the Challenger Deep under heightened security protocols with limited international communication. The crew reported unusual bioluminescent activity at the trench floor, patterns inconsistent with known Hadal zone organisms. They also detected acoustic signals that did not match any species in global databases. All biological, acoustic, and geological data from the mission was classified. Western scientific proposals for joint verification were formally denied. Then, in 2022, unmanned submersible drones operating near the trench floor detected large, fast-moving objects. The speeds recorded were impossible for any known marine organism at Hadal depths, where crushing pressure should make rapid movement physically unfeasible. The drone data was immediately classified by naval research authorities. Freedom of Information Act requests were denied on national security grounds. 3 separate expeditions across 6 decades. Each one reported anomalous life or movement at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, and all 3 datasets were restricted or classified. The mainstream position is that extremophile microbial life and small amphipods are the only confirmed residents, and that all large object detections are instrument artifacts or sediment plumes disturbed by the vehicles themselves. The scientific counter-argument is that Walsh's flatfish may have been real, representing an undiscovered pressure-adapted vertebrate, and that the 50-year gap in exploration was not accidental but deliberate avoidance. The speculative position observes that 3 governments independently detected something anomalous and independently chose suppression. Whatever is moving at 36,000 feet, the consistent response has been to stop looking and lock the filing cabinet. Number 5, the USS Cyclops. The USS Cyclops was a 542-foot Navy collier, a bulk cargo vessel displacing over 19,000 tons. In 1918, she was one of the largest ships in the United States Navy. On March 4th of that year, she departed Barbados carrying 309 crew and passengers plus a full cargo of manganese ore bound for Baltimore. She never arrived. No distress signal was sent. The weather was reportedly calm. An extensive Navy search found nothing. 0 debris, no oil slick, no lifeboats, no bodies. A 19,000-ton warship vanished as if it had never existed. It remains one of the largest non-combat losses of life in U.S. Navy history. The ship's commander, Lieutenant Commander George Worley, was known for eccentric behavior. He altered the Cyclops' planned course without explanation. When questioned, he claimed he had received orders authorizing the deviation. No such orders have ever been found in any naval archive. The 1918 Navy investigation suggested structural failure. It cited no physical evidence to support the conclusion because there was none. Some analysts proposed that the manganese ore cargo shifted during a turn, causing a sudden capsize. But other ships carrying identical loads routinely survived far rougher conditions. The German submarine theory was investigated and conclusively eliminated. Post-war review of Imperial German Navy records confirmed no U-boat operated in the area during the relevant time frame. In 1968, the Navy briefly reopened the case. Investigators found what they described as inconsistencies and communication gaps in the original logs. The findings of the 1968 review were classified and have never been released. Now here is the detail that transforms this from a tragedy into a pattern. The Cyclops had 2 sister ships, identical vessels of the same class. The Proteus vanished in the same region during World War II. No wreckage was ever found. The Nereus, the 3rd ship, also vanished in the same waters under nearly identical circumstances. No wreckage found. 3 structurally identical ships. Same region. 2 decades apart. 0 debris from any of them. The statistical probability of that being coincidental starts to collapse under its own weight. All 3 ships disappeared in waters later associated with experimental naval testing programs. Requests to access early 20th century naval weapons and communications testing records from the region remain classified. The mainstream theory holds that a structural weakness in the Cyclops class, combined with heavy ore cargo and possible rogue waves, caused rapid foundering. The military historical theory suggests the ships entered active testing zones and were destroyed by weapons or experimental technology. The fringe interpretation argues that the identical nature of all 3 disappearances, same class, same region, 0 trace, points to an environmental or geophysical phenomenon specific to that location that overwhelms vessels matching a certain structural profile. 3 ships, 1 blueprint, 1 stretch of ocean, no wreckage, and no answers. Number 6. The ARA San Juan. On November 15, 2017, the captain of the Argentine submarine ARA San Juan radioed in to report a minor electrical fire in the battery compartment. He stated the fire had been extinguished and confirmed the vessel would continue submerged. That was the last communication. The submarine was located 1 year later, sitting at approximately 3,000 feet depth, roughly 300 miles off the Argentine coast. The pressure hull was shattered, a catastrophic implosion. Hydroacoustic monitoring stations had detected an explosion-like acoustic signature at the precise moment of loss. That much was expected. What was not expected was what the waveform analysis showed. Independent analysts examined the acoustic data and concluded the pattern was more consistent with an external shock striking the hull than an internal battery explosion. The shock wave appeared to have impacted from outside, not radiated outward from within. The official Argentine Navy position dismissed the external explosion theory entirely. The battery fire was the cause. Case closed. Families of the 44 crew members requested access to sonar data, mission logs, and acoustic recordings. They were refused. The wreck was declared a war grave, legally prohibiting any further examination or recovery of evidence. Then leaked documents changed the picture. Classified files that reached the media suggested the San Juan had been operating in an area experiencing recent uncharted seismic disturbances. More significantly, leaked tracking documents indicated the submarine had been ordered to investigate an unidentified submerged object detected on sonar. The object was reportedly moving at speeds inconsistent with any known submarine, torpedo, or marine vessel. According to the leaked files, the San Juan received orders to intercept and identify this object shortly before losing contact. Argentine officials categorically denied the authenticity of the documents. In 2022, metallurgical examination of recovered hull fragments revealed extreme thermal stress on certain sections. The thermal signatures were inconsistent with temperatures produced by a standard lithium-ion battery fire. They were too hot. That analysis was classified upon completion. The mainstream theory is seawater intrusion into the battery compartment, causing a hydrogen explosion and catastrophic implosion. The speculative theory asks a harder question: an external shock wave, thermal anomalies that do not match a battery fire, a submarine ordered to chase an object moving faster than anything known, and every piece of contradicting evidence systematically classified or legally sealed. Whatever destroyed the San Juan, the Argentine government has ensured that the full story stays at 3,000 feet. Number 7. Pavlopetri. In 1967, British oceanographer Nicholas Fleming identified a submerged site off the southern coast of Laconia, Greece, near the village of Pavlopetri. What he found beneath 10 to 13 feet of clear Mediterranean water was a city: streets, multi-room buildings, courtyards, tombs, public gathering spaces. It covers approximately 50,000 square meters, roughly 12 acres of organized urban terrain. It dates to approximately 3000 BCE, making it the oldest known submerged city in the world. Think about what that means in terms of evolutionary steps in human development. In 3000 BCE, most of Europe was still in the early stages of the Bronze Age. Permanent settlements existed, but planned cities with streets, public architecture, and designated burial areas represent a level of social organization that the conventional timeline places later. Pavlopetri was doing urban planning before the pyramids at Giza were built. Cultural artifacts from both the Bronze Age and the Mycenaean period, roughly 1600 to 1100 BCE, litter the seabed across the site. But the city itself predates Mycenaean civilization by over 1,000 years. Pottery, tools, and everyday objects sit on the ocean floor in shallow, accessible water. After Fleming's initial survey, the site was largely ignored for nearly 4 decades. The academic establishment showed minimal interest. Then, in 2009, an advanced sonar mapping project revealed the city was significantly larger and older than the 1960s survey had indicated. That should have triggered a major excavation program. Instead, it triggered restrictions. A comprehensive multi-year excavation plan was approved in principle, but then heavily restricted in practice. Invasive excavation is prohibited without special authorization that is functionally never granted. Repeated requests to use ground-penetrating sonar to examine buried layers beneath the visible structures were denied. Research teams may photograph, they may map surface features, they may not dig. In 2015, satellite imaging revealed that Pavlopetri is not an isolated city. It is part of a larger network of submerged settlements. All proposals to explore the surrounding structures were denied. Authorities cite environmental protection. Researchers point out they have offered to fund entirely non-invasive methods. Officials say they are waiting for better technology. Researchers respond that the technology already exists and has been formally offered. The mainstream explanation is straightforward. Tectonic activity along the Hellenic Arc submerged the coastline. The site is protected to prevent looting and damage. The archaeological theory is more provocative. Pavlopetri's age and urban complexity challenge established timelines of when organized civilization emerged in Europe. Full excavation, particularly of the deeper and older layers, could rewrite Bronze Age history. The speculative view observes that decades of neglect followed by active obstruction looks less like conservation and more like gatekeeping. What lies beneath the oldest visible structures at Pavlopetri? No one knows, and no one is allowed to find out. Number 8. The MV Joyita. On October 3, 1955, the MV Joyita left Apia, Samoa, on a routine 2-day voyage to the Tokelau Islands. She carried 25 passengers and crew. 5 weeks later, the vessel was found drifting 600 miles off her intended course, north of Fiji. She was listing heavily but still afloat. Every single person aboard was gone. The Joyita had been built with cork-lined hulls specifically engineered for buoyancy. The ship was designed to be unsinkable. Even fully flooded, she could not go to the bottom. Whoever left her knew, or should have known, that the safest place was on the vessel. No bodies were ever recovered from any ocean, no lifeboats, no life jackets. 25 people vanished completely. The physical evidence told an ugly story. The deck was covered in significant quantities of blood. Medical supplies were scattered across the cabin. An open medical kit and bloodied bandages indicated someone had suffered serious trauma and received emergency treatment aboard. The volume of blood suggested a life-threatening injury. The ship's radio was found tuned to the international distress frequency. But the antenna wiring had been deliberately severed. Examination confirmed the cables were cut with a sharp blade. Not corroded, not frayed, not torn by mechanical stress. Cut. The logbook was gone. Navigation charts were gone. All firearms aboard were gone. Someone had removed the ship's identity, her defensive capability, and her records. But money, personal jewelry, and trade goods remained untouched in the cabins. This was not robbery. The logical contradiction is sharp. If the crew abandoned ship due to flooding, why did they take no food, no water, and no survival supplies? Why did they take guns and navigation tools instead? Why did they leave a ship that could not sink? The official inquiry concluded that a hull breach caused the crew to panic and abandon the vessel. The finding ignores nearly every piece of physical evidence aboard. In 1963, matching wreckage, possibly a lifeboat, was reportedly found approximately 2,000 miles from where the Joyita was discovered. No official record of the examination exists. The wreckage was reportedly destroyed without documentation. Declassified documents confirm that in 1955, the surrounding Pacific waters were being used for intensive submarine testing and weapons experimentation. Requests to access detailed naval operational logs from the region during that period have been denied. And the Joyita herself was eventually salvaged and scrapped, ending all possibility of forensic re-examination. The mainstream theory: hull leak, failed radio, crew panic, tragic drowning. The military theory: the Joyita stumbled into a classified naval operations zone. The severed radio wires. The removed navigation documents. The guns taken but gold left behind. The subsequent destruction of every piece of physical evidence. This was not a boating accident. Number 9. The Mary Celeste. On December the 4th, 1872, the crew of the merchant vessel Dei Gratia spotted a ship drifting in the Atlantic Ocean between the Azores and Portugal. The ship was the Mary Celeste. She was structurally intact, fully seaworthy, under partial sail. She had not been wrecked. In her hold sat 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, untouched, properly secured, commercially valuable. 6 months' worth of food and fresh water remained aboard. There was no resource emergency. All 10 people were gone. Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, 7 crew members, vanished. No signs of violence. Personal belongings were in place. Pipes, razors, clothing, all undisturbed. A disassembled pump suggested someone had been performing routine bilge maintenance, not responding to a crisis. The single yawl, the small lifeboat, was missing. That tells us the departure was deliberate. They chose to leave, but why? The ship's log recorded calm seas in the days before abandonment, no storm, no emergency weather. The sails were partially set as though the crew left quickly but not in blind panic. A controlled but urgent evacuation. The chronometer had stopped. The compass was broken or displaced, and the log ended abruptly on November 25th, 9 full days before the vessel was found. 9 days of silence. The official inquiry in Gibraltar ruled out piracy because all valuables and cargo were untouched. It ruled out mutiny because there was no evidence of conflict. The leading remaining theory was alcohol fumes. The idea is that volatile vapors from the denatured alcohol created a perceived explosion risk, and the crew fled to the lifeboat as a precaution. The problem is that no scorch marks, no ruptured barrels, and no blast damage were found anywhere on the ship. And if the crew fled from fumes, why did they not row back once the danger passed? The Mary Celeste was still fully functional. She sailed herself for 9 days without anyone aboard. Waterspouts were proposed, but the ship showed no structural damage from water impact. The lifeboat was never found. No trace of it, despite the abandonment occurring in one of the Atlantic's busiest shipping lanes. No bodies ever washed ashore on any Atlantic coast. 10 people disappeared from the historical record completely. 150 years of investigation, dozens of theories, zero resolution. And one dark footnote. The Mary Celeste herself was deliberately run aground off Haiti in 1885 by her final owner in an insurance fraud scheme. The ship that mystified the world was destroyed for money. Whatever happened on November 25, 1872, happened fast enough to make 10 people abandon a perfectly good ship into open ocean, and completely enough that not one of them was ever seen again. Number 10. The Ma Noi, Japan's Devil's Sea. Off the southern coast of Japan, stretching roughly between Miyakojima and Iwo Jima, lies a region of ocean comparable in size to the Bermuda Triangle. The Japanese government has formally designated it a danger zone. That is not folklore, it is official policy. Commercial maritime charts include explicit warnings advising ships to exercise extreme caution or avoid the area entirely. Decades of reports document compass malfunctions, complete electronic failures, and the disappearance of both ships and aircraft. In September 1952, the Japanese research vessel Kaiomaru No. 5 was sent into the region specifically to study its dangers. The ship vanished with all 31 crew aboard. No distress signal was sent despite the vessel carrying advanced communications equipment. No wreckage was found. The Japanese government's response was to declare the zone officially dangerous. It launched no investigation into what specifically destroyed the ship. Dozens of vessels and hundreds of lives have been lost in the region since formal record-keeping began in the mid-20th century. The aviation component is particularly difficult to explain through purely geological models. Methane hydrate eruptions from the seabed can theoretically reduce water density enough to sink a ship, but they do not bring down aircraft. In 2005, a proposal to comprehensively map the seabed using autonomous drones was reviewed by authorities for years before being rejected. The floor of the Devil's Sea remains unmapped. Local fishermen report the ocean surface glowing faintly at night in the region. Not the familiar blue-green of known bioluminescence, something different. Persistent reports also describe sudden fog banks that cause all electronic equipment to fail simultaneously. Navigation, radio, engine management systems, crews call it electronic fog. In 2015, satellite imaging captured massive underwater disturbances beneath the surface of the Devil's Sea. Swirling patterns suggesting enormous displacement. Analysts interpreted the scale as something rising from depth. The displacement volumes exceeded any known geological event profile. The data was forwarded to Japan's meteorological agency. No public statement was ever issued. U.S. and Japanese military operational reports from the region are strictly classified under bilateral defense agreements. Crew members of military vessels operating in the area are formally instructed not to discuss their observations. Those who speak anonymously describe unexplained sonar contacts and rapid extreme temperature shifts in the water column. The mainstream geological explanation cites underwater volcanic activity and methane hydrate releases. The fringe interpretation focuses on the institutional paradox. The Japanese government acknowledges the region is dangerous enough to officially warn every ship away, but refuses to investigate why. The Devil's Sea is formally lethal and institutionally untouchable. Something is happening in those waters. The government that named it dangerous has decided it would rather not know what. Now step back from the individual locations and listen to the thread running through them. At least 4 separate sites covered here involve detection of anomalous acoustic signatures. The Dragon Hole, the Challenger Deep, the Devil's Sea, the ARA San Juan's final tracking data. In every case, the sounds share common characteristics. They are structured, not random. They are non-biological, matching no known species. They are non-geological, not tectonic. And in all 4 cases, the frequency data was classified or suppressed before any published analysis could be completed. This is not unprecedented. The U.S. Navy's Cold War era sound surveillance system known as SOSUS detected numerous unexplained deep ocean sounds over decades. Many remain unidentified. In 1997, NOAA recorded the bloop, an ultra-low frequency sound consistent with a biological source far larger than any known animal. It was later attributed to an ice quake, though debate persists. Other named detections, Julia, Slow Down, Upsweep, have never been definitively explained. The physics of underwater sound makes this particularly interesting. The SOFAR channel, the sound fixing and ranging channel, allows low-frequency sounds to travel thousands of miles through the ocean. A single source could theoretically be detected on the other side of the planet. That means acoustic detection is also the primary tool of submarine warfare. Any anomalous underwater sound has immediate national security implications, and that creates a dual explanation for classification. The data might be suppressed not because of what is making the sound, but because the detection itself reveals classified military sensor capabilities. The mainstream position is that all anomalous ocean sounds are explicable through ice dynamics, volcanic activity, or instrument error, and that classification is about protecting sensor technology. The scientific counterpoint is that the deep ocean's acoustic environment below 3,000 feet is profoundly understudied and genuinely unknown processes, biological or geological, almost certainly produce sounds we have not yet cataloged. The speculative view notes that structurally similar sounds detected across thousands of miles of ocean suggest either a distributed species or a coherent system of some kind that no current framework can categorize. No major oceanographic institution has published a comparative analysis of deep ocean anomalous acoustics. The technology to resolve these questions exists. It has simply never been deployed for this purpose. Now consider the pattern itself. Across the 10 cases covered here, at least 6 different national governments have classified, restricted, or destroyed deep ocean research data. China classified Dragon Hole and Challenger deep findings. Japan classified Ningen sonar data and refused to investigate the Devil's Sea. Argentina classified San Juan acoustic data and sealed the wreck. Egypt restricted Heracleion access and blocked deep excavation. Greece blocked Pavlopetri excavation for decades. The United States classified Challenger deep drone data and denied freedom of information requests. The mechanism is consistent. Initial discovery generates interest and excitement. Then, access is restricted, data is classified, collaboration is denied, vague justifications are offered, preservation, national security, environmental protection. The Joyita and San Juan cases go further. In both, physical evidence was destroyed or legally sealed. There are legitimate reasons for some of this. Deep ocean sensor data reveals military capabilities. Restricting access to fragile archaeological sites prevents looting. Those are rational, mundane explanations that apply to some of the classification, but they do not explain classifying biological samples. They do not explain suppressing acoustic frequency data from limestone caves. They do not explain blocking archaeological digs at shallow, accessible sites that could be studied non-invasively. Whether the suppression conceals routine military secrets or extraordinary discoveries, the practical effect is identical. Humanity's understanding of 70% of the planet's surface is artificially constrained. The biology reinforces this. Deep sea gigantism is established science. Cold water, high pressure, low predation, and sparse food all select for larger body size. We have confirmed this in isopods, squid, and crabs. But the upper limits of the phenomenon are unknown because deep ocean survey coverage is less than 5%. The dragon hole's organisms living in zero oxygen acid represent an unexplained leap from microbial anoxic tolerance to complex multicellular life. No known metabolic pathway accounts for it. Chemosynthesis requires specific mineral substrates not documented at the site. The unidentified soft-bodied creatures observed in the hole may represent an entirely unknown branch of life. At Challenger deep pressures, proteins denature and cell membranes collapse. Life at 36,000 feet requires fundamentally different biochemistry. If Walsh's flatfish was real, it would represent a biological revolution: pressure-resistant bones, a modified swim bladder, a novel circulatory system. Current estimates suggest over 80% of ocean species remain undiscovered. Every decade, marine biology finds something thought impossible. The ocean's capacity to surprise is its most consistent characteristic. Two confirmed submerged cities, Heracleion and Pavlopetri, have already rewritten portions of ancient history. Since the last glacial maximum, roughly 20,000 years ago, sea levels have risen approximately 120 meters, nearly 400 feet, submerging vast stretches of formerly habitable coastline. Throughout human history, the most advanced settlements concentrated along coasts for trade, food, and transportation. Those are precisely the areas now underwater. Millions of square miles of formerly dry land sit beneath the ocean. Doggerland, the landmass that once connected Britain to continental Europe, was inhabited for millennia. Its entire archaeological record is submerged and barely studied. Off the coast of Gujarat, India, submerged structures at the site of Dwarka have been controversially dated to over 9,000 years ago. Off Japan's coast, the Yonaguni formations resemble stepped pyramids, and debate continues over whether they are natural or carved. Pavlopetri's planned streets and public buildings in 3000 BCE suggest urban organization may predate conventional timelines by centuries or more. But at both Heracleion and Pavlopetri, excavation of the layers below the known cities has been blocked. What lies underneath the oldest documented structures remains unknown. Side-scan sonar, LiDAR bathymetry, and autonomous underwater vehicles could survey submerged coastlines globally within a decade. The technology exists. NASA's annual budget exceeds $25 billion. Deep ocean archaeological survey funding is a fraction of 1% of that figure. The political barriers are equally obstructive. Underwater sites cross national maritime boundaries, creating jurisdictional disputes that prevent coordinated international surveys. If two confirmed submerged cities have rewritten parts of our past, the hundreds of potential sites on submerged continental shelves represent an untapped archive. The ocean covers 71% of Earth's surface. It contains 97% of all habitable space on the planet by volume. Less than 20% of the ocean floor has been mapped to modern resolution standards. We have better maps of Mars and the Moon. Below 6,000 meters, pressures exceed 600 atmospheres. Anoxic zones, acidic deep waters, and chemosynthetic ecosystems operate on biological rules. We are only beginning to decode. We have confirmed cities that rewrite history, organisms that defy known biology, sounds that match no known source, and objects that move at speeds that should be physically impossible. We have also been denied the classified datasets, the blocked excavations, the destroyed evidence, and the restricted imaging that would answer these questions or deepen them. Humanity possesses the tools to resolve virtually every mystery discussed here: sonar arrays, autonomous drones, deep-rated submersibles, satellite imaging. The technology is not theoretical. It exists deployed daily for military and commercial purposes. The deep ocean is not beyond our reach. It is beyond our permission. Every mystery here operates within the fundamental laws of physics, chemistry, and biology. Pressure, sound propagation, evolutionary adaptation, geological process. These are not supernatural questions, they are scientific ones, waiting for investigation. The ocean does not defy natural law. It operates in domains where we have not yet applied it. 500 years ago, the deep ocean was assumed empty and lifeless. Every generation since has proven that assumption wrong. There's no reason to believe our generation is the exception. What the deep ocean contains is a question of exploration, not imagination. The answers exist physically, at depth, waiting for permission or persistence.